Hello and welcome to the K&K Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin.
And I'm Ken.
All right. Um,
You know, last time last time we forgot to mention our names.
yeah, no, I listened to it again just now, and then um, yeah, you had introduced me, but you didn't introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we can start like that. Like I think that's how Ryan Link does it too, right? Like I'm Link, I'm whatever, right?
Uh-huh. That's
Yeah.
good.
Should we start over, or is this part of the
No,
podcast?
this is part of it, man.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Kevin. That's Ken. This episode two, we'll be talking about Ken's recent trip to Big Bear. He got back, what, yesterday or 2 days ago?
Uh t 2 days ago.
2 days ago, yeah. So super recent. Yeah, he went with his girlfriend Sherry and a couple of her new workmates. So yeah, Ken, why don't you just kick us off? Like, let us know what happened. Um, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So, just to make the timelines a little bit easier to follow, we left Friday morning, and right now it's Tuesday. And then it was a weekend trip, so it was Saturday and Sunday, and then we got back Sunday night. So it wasn't nearly as long as your trip to Hawaii, which we talked about in episode one. Um, so I guess to start us off, I'll talk about the inception of this idea. So, Sherry has this close group of coworkers ever since she started her new job, and they're all in the same like team under the same field, which is data. And it's a very small group of people. It's only like 10 people. So they've been talking about doing a trip somewhere or some sort of getaway just to kind of further their bond. And they decided on Big Bear. And because right now we're in August and it's not winter, there's no snow. So the idea was to have sort of a summer trip and then do water activities. That's kind of the basis that we built everything around.
Uh-huh. I mean, one quick thing I just noticed that like it's kind of crazy that they had just met and they're already planning a trip together. Because like, dude, the last trip that we went on as friends was what fucking also Big Bear, right? But then
Big
like the
Bear?
trip, yeah, but the trip like even with like the large group with like other friends was Pismo, right? And that was like years ago. So it's kind of crazy that they had already decided to have a getaway after only having met for like a couple weeks or a couple months at most. But yeah, 'cause-
Yeah. Wait, you mean Arrowhead?
oh right, yeah, it was Arrowhead. I mean, they're close by, right?
They
Arrowhead
are
and Victor.
they are close by. I passed by signs. There's actually a junction, I think, where when you get there, you can either make a left to go to Arrowhead or a right to Big Bear. So they're that close that they're in the same general area.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
and not only that, but funnily enough, there's an area in between called Arrow Bear.
That is crazy.
That's hilarious, right?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. But to address what you just brought up though, I think a big part of it is because a lot of them are just starting out their professional careers, and because they have all this newfound income, I think that's what prompted them to be more relaxed with, like, being more willing to go on a trip, right? Because although our friend group have known each other for a long time, we knew each other before any of us had disposable income, right?
Right, but I still don't know if like in like like finances is a big reason why we don't go on trips. I think nowadays it is, but like before, I feel like we had a lot of opportunities to do stuff, but I don't think we did it as much. But yeah, that's besides the point.
Yeah, I think that's true. Maybe I was thinking more of, about that Japan trip we've been talking about for years.
Oh right, yeah. I mean, like even yeah. I mean, that's definitely like sort of a monetary thing, and also it's like time getting everyone's schedules to line up. But then like a weekend trip, like we just don't we haven't we just don't ever do that really. It's kind of wonder why, but
Yeah, but to move forward with the story, the the group, that data group, they had a boot camp that finished up recently, and they wanted to get together and do something because the team was going to be dispersed into other teams across the company. And so they wanted to do something sooner rather than later. And the Airbnb was actually booked like the week we went, which is kind of insane to think about because I don't know about you, but whenever we've planned a trip, I feel like we've always had to book the Airbnb at least a month out, if not, a couple months, and kind of think about it for a while and let things marinate. Largely because um, if you book something last minute, it tends to cost more, right?
Right.
But yeah, this is kind of why I was hinting at the newfound disposable income because I think definitely I don't think the Airbnb cost that much. There were options that costed a lot more, but I think people wanted to be a little frugal. But I think there were some people in the group who were fine with any Airbnb, and I think that plays towards the newfound disposable income, and that's why I thought that was maybe a reason why our group hadn't gone on many trips together.
That's true. Yeah, I feel like having like very lax finances sort of gives you that flexibility to not even worry, even if like someone has to cancel or something. Like it's not that big a deal.
Right. But so Friday comes around, and I have to say that before the day even came, I was pretty excited because I'm a big fan of doing water stuff, which is in contrast to episode one where we talked about your guys' trip to Hawaii. Because I don't know what your expectations were when it came to activities you guys would do, because seeing that you guys went to an island, I know that you guys expected most of your activities to be water based. Um, but I know that before you went, you weren't too keen on getting in the water. So, I mean, what were you thinking before you went to Hawaii?
So we had like planned like a pretty like we didn't plan every single day exactly like mentioned, but we had a lot of activities, so I sort of knew like sort of the
Agenda?
the items, yeah, and the agenda. So like I was sort of just thinking in that context. Like when it comes to water stuff, we hadn't planned like specific events for the water. Like we didn't really plan to snorkel. It just sort of came about. But obviously we knew that like you know if there was like an activity in the afternoon, like sort of in the evening, we can go to water and stuff. So it didn't really cross my mind before the trip.
I see. Okay,
But I
that's
guess that might be in contrast to your trip here because most of the items were water based, right?
yeah. Pretty much everything was based around the water, and the truth be told, that was like my driving reason to want to go because um, I've met Sherry's coworkers before, and they're nice people. But it's always you're always a little apprehensive when you have to like meet people that you're not super familiar with. But I was like, I really want to do these water things. Um, and if it can't just be me and Sherry, then so be it. And I'm making it seem like I really didn't want to meet these people, which definitely wasn't the case. And by the end of it, we all got to know each other pretty well. So, in terms of relationships, even though they're not my coworkers, I would definitely say that we probably all consider each other friends now, which is pretty cool. Um, but let's get on with like the actual trip, right? So there were six of us, three guys, three girls, two couples, me and Sherry, and then another couple by the name of Andrew and Serenity.
Serenity.
Serenity, yeah, that's an interesting name, right? I kept thinking her name was Serendipity. I don't know why. And then there is two singles, one named Jimmy and then another one named Talia. So Andrew and Talia are pretty close with Sherry, or Sherry's pretty close with them. She would probably consider them like, her closest friends at work. And then Jimmy is this guy from the Bay Area. And then before that, he was from Taiwan. Um, and the reason I bring that up is because I didn't know how recent he came to America. And I found out later that he's been here for like over a decade. So he's like very Americanized now. And then the last girl, Serenity, none of us had met her because she's Andrew's girlfriend and she doesn't work in their company. So it was our first time meeting them too. Her too, I mean. But there's actually a seventh person, and it was their dog, Luna, Andrew and Serenity's.
Oh wow, they brought their dog.
Yeah, it's like this really young, spunky black lab. It's actually kind of freaky because not freaky, but I don't really know many people with black dogs. Like black cats are pretty common, but black dogs I think are not common. They're usually golden or brown or like white in the case of a husky. But it's like this all black dog, and then its eyes are also black, and then it's like toe beans are also black. So it's just all black. It looks kind of cool. It's also kind of scary because dogs' pupils are so big, you can't see the whites. So sometimes you can't tell if it's looking at you or if its eyes are closed.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, especially because our Airbnb was kind of poorly lit, so then you really couldn't tell if it was looking at you or not. But the dog ended up being kind of like I don't know if I'd go so far as to say a hurdle, but it consideration lots of consideration did have to go into take care of the dog, which I'll get into later. But so we had to kind of last minute decide on like who was driving and how many cars we were taking. And over like I think ultimately the consensus was that we should take two cars because um the only person with a car big enough to drive all six people and the dog is Sherry's dad's car. But then it probably would have been my responsibility to drive all of us. And I just put my foot down. And I was like, listen, I don't think I'd be comfortable driving your dad's bigger car on top of having to drive six people and all their luggage because that adds a lot of weight to the car, right? And I don't know if you guys know, but the road to Big Bear is very windy. And it's not during the winter months, so thankfully there's no ice or snow. But as like a Los Angelesian, we're just not used to driving on those roads, which is appropriate because Andrew and Serenity are actually from Oregon, and I don't know if you've been to Oregon, but their roads are actually very windy, and it goes through forests and around cliffs too. So they were kind of used to it, but we definitely weren't. And so I told Sherry I would prefer it if I just took my mom's car, which is an SUV, as opposed to my sedan. And then I just picked up um, Jimmy and Talia, and then Andrew and Serenity can just go with their dog, right? I thought that'd be like the best approach because then the two couple can be in their own space with their dog. If anything were to happen, then it'd be fine, and there wouldn't, if there was a hiccup, then nobody else would have to be bothered by it. If the dog kind of like, I didn't know how good the dog was, so if like, I don't know, it like pooped in the back or something, then there wouldn't have to be someone else to have to deal with it in the back, right?
Right.
But that plan was good, but the issue is that Jimmy lives in Irvine, and Talia lives in like Santa Ana, Westminster, and we asked them both to drive up to Torrance just to save ourselves the trouble because Big Bear is kind of like northeast, but Irvine is kind of like southeast, and then Westminster is just like kind of plain east. So it would add a little bit of time. And they were okay with it at first, but then there was some things going on with Jimmy, like on his side, nothing bad. And he ended up just asking Andrew if he can ride with him because Andrew also lives in Irvine. And I was perfectly fine with that because it makes more sense. I wasn't sure if Andrew was okay with something like that, but it makes more sense because they both live in Irvine, so they can just pick up each other and then drive up. And then on the way down, they're already in Irvine, as opposed to if I had to, pick up Jimmy and then drop him off, it would be out of the way both times,
Yeah.
So we didn't pick up Jimmy, but we picked up Talia, and then we went on our way. Now, I know you went to Big Bear earlier this year. I don't know what your recollection of the drive was, but it was about 2.5 hours for us on the way there because there was a lot of traffic in like the San Bernardino Riverside area, and it was pretty ass. Like my right foot, the foot I use for driving, or I guess everyone uses for driving, just was like cramping up. So that was, I thought it would be like really bad on the way back too, but it wasn't as bad. And then we made like a pit stop in San Bernardino to kind of like stretch out, and then we got groceries as well. So in terms of like food, I wasn't too sure what to expect from Big Bear because this is my first time. When we went to Arrowhead, that's like probably the closest thing that I can relate to. And I remember Arrowhead having restaurants and a couple grocery stores. But other than that, I remember it being a little sparse. But Big Bear is definitely bigger and more touristy. So when we got there, I was really pleasantly surprised to find out that it's like a full blown city, right? They had like McDonald's, Jack in the Box, they had a Ralph's, or maybe, I think it was a Vaughn's. They had like T-Mobile, PetSmart, like all sorts of city like things. And maybe that's like the first thing I want to touch on because when you guys went to Maui, I remember you saying that you really liked how naturey it was, and that if you were to go to Hawaii again, you'd want to go even more in that direction and maybe go to like Kauai. And maybe Maui and Kauai are a different type of nature than something like Arrowhead or Big Bear or Oregon. But I don't know, when we go to like these really like rural areas, I don't know what it is, but I feel a little bit uneasy that I don't have access to everything I need. And so um I was I was pleased, I guess, that Big Bear wasn't super rural. I don't know if you have anything to comment.
Um, no, I think that's pretty cool actually. Like that they've it's quite developed because I feel like um despite that, you still feel like you're in like very naturey area. I'm assuming.
Yes, for
I
sure.
don't think I don't think I've really explored like the bigger city. I'm just like looking at a map, like something like 7-Eleven and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Because
so it's like that's pretty cool, yeah.
you only spent one day, right?
I think
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we didn't even do anything. Like we had just for context, I went to Big Bear like a couple times this year, just to snowboard. So no, we would just drive up to the snow summit or wherever, snowboard for the entire day, and then just drive home. So like, we wouldn't spend time in the actual Big Bear area. But looking at it, it's like it's a pretty big area, and it seems like there's a lot. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that sounds exhausting to like drive up for just a day trip to Big Bear, snowboard all day, and then have to drive back. Like whoever is driving must have been a trooper
Yeah,
because
no,
it
yeah, for
takes a
sure.
long time to get back.
Like basically everyone who doesn't drive is like completely knocked out. And like
Oof,
yeah, whoever drives like has like two energy drinks and a coffee ready. It's
Jesus.
it's pretty brutal.
Yeah. Okay, so we finally reach the Airbnb maybe around 5, and we left at I want to say 1. So we had to take that stop for the groceries, and then we arrive around 5, Now the other party don't leave until 5 because
Wow.
Jimmy's girlfriend Serenity works until 5. So I think they end up arriving around like 8 or 9. And in that time in between, the three of us just kind of like converse and like eat some snacks. And then my idea for dinner that night was pizza. So the day before, I made um, like this big thing of pizza dough, and I brought a sheet pan. And the idea was to just make a sheet pan pizza that I can cut up into like little squares. I thought that'd be a good idea because it would have been super easy, and like who doesn't like pizza, right? Um, so I really wasn't sure if people wanted to like mostly cook or eat out because I think like Andrew doesn't really mind spending money, but then Jimmy and Talia did. So I thought it'd be like a pretty good compromise if I brought some ingredients and then we did some cooking one day, and then the next day maybe we can go eat out, right? So we bought ingredients for pizza that night, and then we also bought ingredients for breakfast, which is kind of Sherry's life pro tip: is whenever you travel to try to at least cook breakfast if you can, because her Airbnb in Hawaii had a kitchen, which I know you guys didn't. So she cooked breakfast like rice, spam, and eggs, um, and so, I'll kind of fast forward through all the waiting we had to do for the other party to arrive, but they eventually arrived around 9. Now, as for the accommodations, we got like a cabin. It was very similar to the cabin we got in Arrowhead with Ty and Nicole.
Mhm.
It was 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, but one of the bathrooms was in a master bedroom, which is kind of awkward because that means that the couple gets one bathroom to themselves, and then the other 4 people, right, the 2 singles and the other couple, have to share the other bathroom. So whoever gets the master kind of gets, the best draw, right? Now we arrived really early, and we had to put our stuff somewhere, and there was also a hot tub in the back, and somebody had the idea of going in the hot tub early, and so we kind of had to get changed and put our stuff somewhere. And I was like, okay, let's just temporarily put our stuff in the master, and then when they come, maybe we can like do something to figure out who gets the master, like play a game or something like Jenga or something, which is what I think we did in Arrowhead, right? You, me, Tina, and Kevin played. You, me, Tina, and Sherry played Jenga to see who got which room, right?
Yeah, yeah, we played this, whoever won got to decide of the two, and it's gonna be decided to give Ty the master.
Which was a really good idea, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
that was a good idea.
yeah. Um, Now this time, because nobody was like helping us out to get the Airbnb, it was a little bit more difficult to decide because obviously the singles we get um their own rooms, and so it was one master bedroom and then another, basically master bedroom except for the bathroom part, and then 2 like smaller rooms with like twin beds. So
Wait,
that's,
so there's 4 rooms total?
yeah, 4 rooms total and then 2
Oh, okay,
bathrooms.
okay.
I think I might have said 3 rooms earlier, which
Yeah, yeah. That's why I was confused. I was like, so did the singles sleep together? Okay,
no,
I
no, no,
see.
yeah, yeah. So there are 2 rooms with twin beds and then 2 rooms with like queen beds.
Gotcha. So
Uh,
the main debate is which couple gets the nicer master.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. So
So
those singles are irrelevant. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we put our stuff in the master bedroom, and then when Andrew and his girlfriend arrived, they were like, "Oh, we really don't care. You guys can take that one. We'll just take the one upstairs." Now I'm not sure if they're just saying that, um, like to be nice, or if they actually really didn't care. But we ended up getting the master, which ended up being like really great because like just having that bathroom to yourself was really nice. It's just like that extra personal space to kind of like wind down. Like at the end of the night, it's really ass when it's like 1 or 2 in the morning and you've eaten and drank and you're really tired from a long day, and all you want to do is like brush your teeth or shower and then go to bed, and then you kind of have to wait on people, and then you have to share like the bathroom with like a bunch of other people, and people might lay out their stuff and stuff. So it's really really nice to have that master bedroom. So, like I said, we had the idea of going to the bathtub. Now, I don't really have much experience with bathtubs. I mean, obviously, it's just like hot water and like jets and stuff. But it was already on when we got there, which was a little weird because that either means that somebody came earlier and turned it on for us, or it's permanently on. And I think it's permanently on because when we left, we didn't turn it off either, and there was no instruction on what to do, so we just left it on. But it was like way too hot to get in at first, and it's funny because I actually just watched an Ear Biscuits where Rhett was talking to Link about how he's been really into saunas recently. Um, it's either saunas or bathtubs. I think it was bathtubs. Like he has a jacuzzi in his backyard, and he gets in it like every night or something. And incrementally, he has been increasing the temperature because there are supposed health benefits, like it makes you live longer. Um, I think the episode title was something like "Weird Habits of Successful People."
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of new. I think it came out. It's like one of the last five or six, maybe. But so we were just kind of like waiting for the hot tub to cool down, but it took forever because it's such a large body of hot water. And then the other party finally arrived, and we cooked pizza, and everybody got in the bathtub. And we ate, and then afterwards,
You guys ate in
um,
the hot tub?
yeah, yeah, we did.
Oh, okay, wait, I was joking, but that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
How big was it? It was enough to fit 6 people and a dog?
not not comfortably. So the
Oh,
dog
okay.
definitely didn't get in. It just kind of
Uh,
roamed around. So I ended up meeting the dog, and it was a really well trained dog, because the Airbnb is fenced around, but we left the gate open, and we just let the dog roam around the outside and the inside, and it was never compelled to run away or anything. So the dog was very, very well trained, which was a blessing because it turned out we weren't allowed to leave the dog by itself in the Airbnb as per the rules. I think Andrew and Strandy were okay with doing that, but um, they were kind of keen on following the rules. So we brought the dog everywhere, um, like including like on a hike to a restaurant to the lake, and so at all times someone had to like watch the dog. So that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I said it was a little bit of a hurdle. But I'll get more into it when we like finally get into like the second day and third day activities. But the first day was pretty tame. You know, people got back and people came pretty late, and so we kind of just got to know each other and mingle a little bit. And then that night they played Catan, which is something that they do every single day during work. And it was my first exposure to Catan. I don't know if you've seen Catan, like people actually playing it, but I've heard very good things about it over the years. And I really wanted to bring it to game night between us, but for some reason we never had a chance to play. Um, but I I kind of understand the basis of the game now, and I can see how it could be fun. I would definitely want to bring it to game night if we had another one again. I think it'd be a really fun game to play with um, a group of people who aren't familiar with it yet. I was hesitant to jump in and play because everyone seemed so good already, and it's a strategy game. Like, it felt more strategic than something like Exploding Kittens, because I feel like in Exploding Kittens, foresight is definitely necessary, but I feel like you don't need it to the same degree as Catan. Like, you can probably get away with a lot more, but I feel like Catan, it's all about your setup, and it's a slow paced, long drawn out game that can last like an hour or two, right? And Exploding Kittens definitely doesn't last that long. And so I was kind of hesitant to jump in because I know, like, you know, in the spirit of just like playing and having fun, you should, but I really didn't want to just get my ass whooped. Um, so I kind of just like watched and learned a little bit. And I think when you play games, people's personality really come out. So I can describe people's personalities a little bit. Um, so one thing is though, Serenity wasn't joining us that night because she felt kind of bad. So I couldn't really get a read on who she was. So I really only could like tell you about Andrew, Jimmy, and Talia at this point. Now Talia, we had like ridden in the car together with, and you know she seems like a nice girl, and she went to like Berkeley, so Um, she's kind of got like a little bit of Bay Area culture, and Jimmy also went to Berkeley at the same time, but they didn't know each other. And then Andrew's from Oregon, right? So these are kind of like their backgrounds. But so Andrew is like this like I don't know. I think a good word to describe him is he's kind of a clown. Like he's kind of goofy, but like I wouldn't say he's like super funny. Like I don't know if I should say this on record because I'm glazing a little. But
Say
like
it. Say it.
Ivan is funny, you know. Like he's a but like Isaac's a clown. You know what I mean? Like
Okay. I
Isaac's
guess.
goofy. Ivan's just like funny, you know. So
Okay.
so
Okay.
Andrew's like this like kind of big goofball kind of guy, right? But he can also be like really serious and I think like when you bring up a topic that he's like well informed on, he can kind of switch gears and like really like hone in on like talking about the information because I brought up fitness a couple of times with him and he's a big fitness guy and he told me a little bit about his fitness career which might interest you because you know like you lift and um like he told me that like he got into lifting during the pandemic which is kind of surprising right because that's the time where a lot of people stopped lifting
All right.
and like he had a friend whose dad used to be a power lifter so they had a gym at home and he invited him over to lift and this was like during his like freshman year of college or something like that and so he learned a lot from those two the son and the dad and that's kind of his foundation for fitness and he told me he gained 30 pounds that summer like when he was like starting out lifting which is kind of crazy
That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
like that's definitely not all muscle and um what I found out is he's done this is his fourth bulk and cut cycle and you can definitely tell that he just got off a bulk that's all I'll say
Okay.
which I was really surprised about because this isn't the first time I met him once for lunch with Sherry and some other people and you could tell through his shirt that he's like a big dude you know but I wasn't sure if he was like big muscular or big like chubby
Right.
um but he's like a big dude but he's definitely like coming off the bulk and I would later find out that he's like currently in the cut and like you know he was telling me about how like because I raised some arguments about like if bulking and cutting is really necessary or you know maybe lean bulking is like the better alternative right and I feel like he has some very like set in stone beliefs obviously because he's done it right like he's had the courage to bulk and cut and I'm not even talking about like a weak bulk you know like he's bulked you know like he's 230 right now at like 5'10" so he's a big like dude right and he was just telling me about how like yeah one of like the big pros that people don't talk about with bulking and cutting is that it really changes your confidence in your body image because even if I'm like kind of bigger now like i I'm so confident in the way I look because I know that I can get down to like you know a leaner weight and appearance and he's telling me about his sister who also bulks and cuts and she's apparently also gained a lot of confidence in herself which you know sounds pretty obvious like but you know that's pretty cool yeah um so Andrew's like this you know big like goofball kind of guy and then we have Jimmy who at first like seems very reserved but I come to find out that he's actually like a pretty big troll and it really came out when they played Catan because in Catan you can trade and the thing you trade are resources in the form of like these little playing cards so each playing card will have like a rock or hay or sheep and you use those things to build other things so they're like the foundation right and you can trade like if you need one more sheep you can be like hey I'll choose you this rock for a sheep but Jimmy he'll do this thing where he'll be like all right give me three cards for it So then I started calling him Three Cards Jimmy. Um, so yeah, he's like really troll, but he's also like just really quiet and like just a nice guy.
Okay. I'm imagining like maybe Kevin or something.
Like your roommate?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best. Because appearance wise, definitely not. Because he's like, I would say, pretty different. Kevin's a little
Okay.
bit shorter. Jimmy's like the same height as me, and he's also got like a decently muscular build. So since we're already talking about Andrew and like fitness, I'll talk about Jimmy too. And this is kind of a detour from what we've been talking about. So what's interesting is that obviously like no, not obviously, but I've been working out recently. Like Sharon and I started this summer, like early on this summer, and now it's like August. So it's been like probably 3 to 4 months since we've started, right? So like physiques and fitness is something that's kind of in the forefront of my mind, considering I go to the gym every day, and I wasn't really too sure what to expect um, out of like these like water activities when it comes to like confidence in your own physique and then seeing other people's physiques and stuff. But
Are you talking about like just like being shirtless and like looking at other guys?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. I got you.
yeah. And so like it's interesting seeing both these guys because Andrew is big, but he's like very far from being lean. And then Jimmy's physique is I don't know, it's like this like you could I think the best way to put it is if you didn't lift and you looked at him, you would think, "Oh, he's got a really athletic build."
Okay.
But if you did lift, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, this guy obviously goes to the gym because like his physique is not naturally obtainable just by like existing. Like nobody has like that developed of a back or traps." But the key distinction is that the reason I brought up that if you didn't lift, you would just think he's like athletic looking is that he doesn't look muscular enough where you're like, oh yeah, that guy definitely goes to the gym and pumps iron. You know what I mean? Like he's got
Right.
like this really like do you remember this is kind of weird. All those years ago when we were at Delamo Mall and we saw like some like Asian dude in like a white
What the
t-shirt
fuck?
and he was kind of buff and we both came to the conclusion like that's our ideal physique where it's like you're like subtly buff like not to the point where like people be like oh yeah this guy's a meathead like he goes to the gym like 6 days a week or whatever but like you're like clearly not skinny or like chubby like he had like a really good physique in a t-shirt. Do you remember this or no?
I don't remember this at all.
Wow, because it's weird you don't remember it because you brought it up years later. I
That's
was like wow,
crazy.
wow you still remember this. Yeah, so Jimmy kind of has that physique where it's like you can tell like he works out, but it's not muscular to the point where you're like, oh, this guy like is super dedicated, 6 days a week, like super optimal program. But he just has like a really good physique, right?
Okay.
And I don't know, I'd say like it kind of motivated me because I think like when you really get into fitness, like whether you realize it or not, your standards for what a good physique is just kind of balloon, right? Like when you go to the gym and you see all these like super muscular dudes lifting a lot of weight with their big arms and chest or whatever, you're like, damn, like I want to get there. But it's like you don't really need to get there to have like a good physique. Like and Jimmy, I think that's what Jimmy demonstrates is like you just have like a good physique where you look good in a t-shirt and shorts and that's like pretty much good enough. You don't need to be like Jeff Nippard or something like something like that.
Right. Right. I get what you.
And I think that motivated me because like I think it brought the bar down for me and it brought the goal closer. Like I think I can achieve Jimmy's physique within like maybe like 4 or 5 months. You know what I mean? Like I
Okay.
don't but like before I was like thinking about physiques where it would be unattainable unless I spent another like 2 to 3 to 4 years, right? So you see where I'm coming from now?
Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. So that was something I wanted to touch on. I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to touch up on it, but yeah. So we have Jimmy and then we have Andrew. So that's like the conclusion of the first day. And the second day, our plans were to do a morning hike and then go to the lake. And the lake is sort of like the main thing that everything revolves around, right?
Mhm.
But hiking is also a big part of Big Bear because um, there's a lot of trails, and a lot of them are actually pretty hard, which we've come to find out later. Now, um, what ended up happening was a lot of us woke up kind of late, and so we kind of abandoned the hike idea, and we didn't get out of the house until like 1 or 2 actually. So we cooked breakfast that day, and then we got out of the house and we went to the lake. And I haven't been to many lakes. I've been to Tahoe and I've been to Lake Arrowhead, but Tahoe was so long ago that I don't remember much of it. And then Arrowhead, we went during the pandemic, and so we didn't really have a good, um, like, a very holistic experience of what could have been at the lake. But in my mind, in my like naive, city slicker mind, I thought it was gonna be like a beach except smaller with fresh water and with less currents. But the two biggest differences were that one, there wasn't really like a beach. It was just like rocks along the shore. And so there and even then there weren't many of those openings where you can really like go down and put a blanket down. So that kind of sucked. Um and the second thing is it might have been due to the recent like hurricane that we had, but the water was extremely cold, like colder than the ocean. And I don't know if that's like logical. I've like never really thought like which one would be colder. I just always assumed like maybe the ocean would be colder for some reason. But I've been going to Huntington Beach recently, and the water is like pretty warm, like almost comfortably warm. But the lake was so cold, and the water was kind of dirty looking too. And so I wasn't really comfortable like just going in head first and like getting in there and swimming and all that, which kind of sucked because my imagination was that it would be like this nice calm lake with like a beach side where like all the people who don't really want to go in the water can just chill there with the dog, and then all the people who do like water can just go in, and it's like shallow and it's like semi warm, and then you can just swim and it's nice and easy to swim because there's no big currents. And if you happen to drink some water, then it's like fresh water, so it's okay. And I imagined like this clear lake, but it definitely wasn't any of that, which was definitely really disappointing. um, I know, of course, like if you go to other lakes around the country, like I'm sure you'll find many lakes that are like that. But Big Bear, it's like very touristy, and maybe it has to do with the size of the lake too. But I found out that Big Bear is actually the biggest freshwater lake in SoCal. Um, so I don't know if that plays a role.
Like, was was it to the point that like no one was like literally playing in the water? It's just like jet skiing, kayaking type of thing, or were like people still playing in the water and like swimming and stuff?
Yeah, so we did find a couple areas where you can put down like a blanket or a towel, and in those areas there were a couple of families, like I'd say a good amount of families that were in the water and like frolicking and stuff. It's just that it was just kind of uncomfortable because unlike at the beach where it's like smooth sand all the way, at the lake it's like rocks, and when you step into the water it's still rocks, and then you have to step out pretty far for it not to be rocks.
Uh,
So yeah, there were definitely people out there like just swimming and stuff, but I wouldn't say it's like swimming like a pool where people are just out there by the dozens and swimming. Yeah, it's just a couple people, couple dads maybe, and they're just standing in like chest high water, and then yeah. But um, it's funny you bring that up though because that is sort of the main attraction of Big Bear is the jet skiing and the paddleboarding and the kayaking and stuff. So that's the thing I was really looking forward to besides just swimming in a lake. And so the first day, when we finally got out to the lake, it was a little bit discombobulated because I think some people were expecting us to just jump right into the water activities, and then others maybe were looking for something more chill. And then we all kind of got onto the same page, but by the time we got onto the same page, we realized like, oh man, like it's actually kind of difficult to find like what's like the most reasonably priced rental place and like, do we have enough time left in the day because we left kind of late, right? Like,
What were you guys looking to rent?
yeah. So I'd never really heard of this, but it's called a pontoon, and it's like this like square shaped boat that can fit several people, and the idea was to like strap a tube to the back, not like a long tube, but like a circular donut tube, and then go out into the open lake and then have people in the back tubing. But then what we found out is that the pontoon doesn't go fast enough to do that. And if you want to do something like that, you'd have to get um they called it water sport, which I think is like the term for when you get like a big, not big, but like a fast boat, and then you can do whatever you want on the back. So then if you have like a board and then something to hold on to, that's called wakeboarding. So you like kind of like surf on the wake that the boat is making. You can also do like paragliding, which is when you have like a parachute and it is attached to the boat and the boat goes, and then the air generated will like lift you up. So there's paragliding, there's wakeboarding, and then you can also do tubing, which is what we were trying to do. But then like the thing that was kind of shitty was that you can go online and you can like look at these prices and like make appointments to do these things, but the prices actually ended up being like, I'd say something like 50%, 50 at least 50% higher when you actually called them or went in person. So that kind of caught us by surprise because like wakeboarding, for example, I think was like $300 or something for an hour. Um, so we're kind of in a limbo, and we ended up just going to like this like small beachfront and just like going around, and then like someone was in the water a little bit, and then Andrew actually brought spike ball, and so they were playing spike ball a little bit. But then Sherry and I were kind of disappointed by the water, so she was like, "I wonder if we can just like take our car, go to a rental place, pick up some paddle boards, come back, and then like we can paddleboard." And I was like, "That sounds cool, but I don't know if the paddle boards will fit in my car because they're actually really long."
Right.
So we asked like the big group or the rest of the group, like, "Hey, if we go get some rentals for paddle boards and come back, like, is that cool with you guys?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, go for it." So we go to like this rental that's on the other side of the lake, and we're like, "Hey, we're looking to like rent some paddle boards, like, how much would it cost, and like, do you think that you can kind of estimate if it would fit in my car?" And it turned out that you can get rentals and bring them elsewhere because there were places where they docked all the stuff and they like shipped you off from there to go into the lake. But you can also just pick up the paddleboard and like drive it somewhere else as long as you return it within the time frame. But the issue is that it definitely wasn't going to fit in my car, and you could get like straps to put on the top, but at some point it just felt like we were doing too much, and so we had a choice of like, okay, we can either go back and just like do nothing and just play spike ball and just not really go in the water, or Sherry and I can just paddleboard today, and then tomorrow we can just let the rest of them paddleboard, and then we can watch the dog, for example, right? So that's what we end up doing, and so we got a paddleboard. Now I don't know. Have you paddleboarded?
I've never paddleboarded. That's where you stand up on like the almost like a big surfboard, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think I was always confused on what paddleboarding was because I've seen so many variants of it where you can like sit down crisscross, or you can get on your knees, or you can stand up. It's all paddleboarding. It's just a matter of if you're comfortable standing or not. So they're all paddleboarding, and you have a paddle. That's like the paddle part of the paddleboard. Now, paddleboards come in different sizes. At our place, there's like two sizes, orange and blue. Blue was the bigger one. Orange was like kind of smaller. And I really want to get on a paddleboard with Sherry, and that's actually not very common to do two people per paddleboard, but it can work. And we asked if it could work, and they're like, yeah, it can definitely work. Um, and the reason why was because it would have been my first time, but it actually would have been Sherry's like second or third time because she did it in Hawaii. Um, so she kind of understands the mechanics of it, and I just thought it'd be more fun if we shared the same one, because if we shared separate ones, then we kind of like apart from each other. And the whole point of paddleboarding, I think, is to kind of get out into the lake, and obviously the lake is inaccessible otherwise, and they kind of just like marinate in the middle of the lake and just take in all the sights and like have the sunshine on you. And I just thought it'd be more romantic and fun if we both shared the same paddleboard. So we ended up getting one paddleboard, and we just paddled out into the lake. And I have to say, it was really fun. I highly recommend you do it. Like definitely, if you can, try to get the same paddleboard with Tina, for example. I think that would be definitely doable. Um, I think like if you approach it with like just like try not to argue mindset, then like you guys can coordinate and like definitely get out into the open lake like comfortably, and then from there you can let the current just kind of like drag you to wherever, or you can have one person kind of always holding the oar and like making sure that you're not drifting too far in one direction or another. So we got some nice like scenery out there, and we also got like a wet box, or I guess actually it's called a dry box that you can store your phone in and stuff, and then you can actually bring it out into the middle of the lake. And so Sherry was able to take like some videos and some pictures, but I was like so scared the whole time of like our stuff falling in the lake because it's actually incredibly deep. Like moments after we left, the stick, the paddleboard stick, which is already like 6 feet tall, couldn't reach the bottom. So like the steepness of the lake drops off like really fast. So once you're in the middle, it's like really deep. I never like really looked into how deep we could get, but I mean it's a lake, right? So it's probably like 20 to 40 feet deep or something, maybe even more. I have no idea. But again, I like definitely would highly recommend paddleboarding. Sort of like the goal of paddleboarding, I think, is to eventually be able to stand up. But with two people on it, it becomes a lot more difficult because paddleboarding is a balancing act. So the board itself is incredibly buoyant. Like it takes a lot for it to tip over, especially if it's just one person. But if it's two people, then you have two weights to kind of counterbalance. And then you have the current that's pushing you. So if you're like perpendicular to the current, you're more likely to topple over. And then there's the wind too, which can kind of exacerbate things. So there's a lot of factors to think about. So we mostly just sat down and like went out there. And it's really nice to like just get out into like some really deep water in the middle. It's really awesome. I can see why humans would want to do something like this because it's like almost the best view of the scenery you could possibly get, because when you're out in the open lake, your view is unobstructed, right? Like when you go to like the dock or something, it's cool, but you can only get like 180 view. When you go out into the open lake, you get the 360. So that was really, really neat to do that. And then we eventually came back, and we met up with those people back in the Airbnb because they went home first. And the rest of that night was just like, we did a little bit of drinking, played some more Catan, and then we just, called it a night there. Actually, no, sorry. We also went out for dinner that night. And it's actually notable because so I already talked about how I was pleasantly surprised that Big Bear was more urban than I thought. But there's like this part of Big Bear which I'm sure you probably didn't get to see because you guys just did like a day trip or whatever. But there's this part of Big Bear called the Village, and it's like this whole like shopping district, and with a bunch of like stores and restaurants, and it was really, really nice. And I think a common thing when you go to these rural places is you tend to have like a lot of like country cafes, and like it's just so starkly different from the stores we're used to and the restaurants we're used to here in LA. But like when you went here, every store looked like it could have been in Torrance or something. Like you had Froyo, you had coffee shops, you had like clothing stores, like these boutique stores, burger shops and all that. So we ended up going to like this burger place, and it was packed, and it was actually heavy metal themed, which I thought was really cool. So they decorated the whole place in heavy metal. The menu had heavy metal inspired items. Like I remember there was like Deftones beer, and like Iron Maiden beer, and um, there were burgers that were named after some heavy metal bands like Purple Haze, and there are a couple other ones I can't remember. Californication. There's a burger named Californication, which I think is inspired off Red Hot Chili Peppers. So it's definitely like a rock, heavy metal inspired burger joint.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. What was the name of the burger place?
I think it was something like there's something like Fire Rock Burger and Brew or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But this place was just pretty awesome to find because it's so like I guess another common thing with these rural areas is that it tends to just be one road that takes you to through the whole city, and this was like one turn off the road, but it was just so like well disguised that I just didn't know this was here, and I didn't really do my research before going. Um, but definitely, if you go to Big Bear, you're gonna want to check this place out. Probably at night, because you can just walk around after a long day, just have your food and then digest it while walking around. And that's kind of what we did. So we went there. We had these burgers. I know Ivan was making fun of the burger, but I have to say, it was one of the best burgers I've had. Um, I was really undecided on what kind of burger I wanted to get because I saw one that was sort of like a Philly cheesesteak crossed with a burger. So they put like cheesesteak on the burger. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of meat. Like, I kind of want that. But then I saw another one that was onion rings, beer, barbecue, and like a Southwest sauce and some jalapenos. And I think the Philly cheesesteak burger would have been good, but I think it would have been too unlike a burger. And I was really craving burgers. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this like onion ring beer barbecue burger, and I'm pretty sure it was inspired off the Carl's Jr. Western double bacon cheeseburger, but it was really good.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, but that night was pretty enjoyable, and we all just kind of like got to know each other and mingle better. And the dog was there too, and we played some Jenga because the wait was a little long for everything, like between ordering and getting the food. So it's kind of cool, but they provided like these like games like Connect Four and Jenga and stuff like that. So we played some Jenga, which was pretty cool, and then we all just kind of headed back. And then everybody seemed pretty tired, so they played like a game of Catan, and then we all just went to bed that night. So far the activities have consisted of playing a little bit of spike ball and then taking a dip into the lake, and then for us paddleboarding. Now when we got back, I mentioned that they got back separately and sooner than us, and and Sherry and I felt pretty bad that we kind of ditched them, because I know if I was in this situation, I think I would have been a little upset because I really wanted to do paddleboarding, and if like this other like couple just like got up and left and did it by themselves, I think I would have been like a little bit. I would have felt a little slighted. So we offered to like, hey guys, the next day, tomorrow, we'll just watch the dog. We already kind of got our fill, and you guys can just go out and do whatever, kayaking, paddleboarding, whatever. And so the next day we woke up, and the plan was to actually do the hike this time. So the hike was a little bit of ways from the actual like city proper. So we drove maybe like 10 minutes away from the city. And it was really hard to spot. And like you exited the city, so the road started to get windy again. So it's kind of hard to stop and figure out like where can we park, where could we park. But eventually we found parking, and then we found the entrance to the hike. And like already that should kind of indicate that it's not a hike that we would kind of run into around here in these parts in LA or Irvine, because the hikes here are very like, I don't know, like babysat. You go to like a site, and there's like a ton of parking spots, and then you just kind of start walking on a trail, and then you end up somewhere, right? But this one was a little hidden, and I mentioned it earlier, but the hikes in Big Bear are really hard, man. Like it's just all up the mountains, and it's like really steep, and there's a ton of rocks, and the gravel is really slippery too. So if you don't have like hiking shoes, which I didn't, and most people didn't, then it's a little tricky to go down, especially. So I would say it was definitely the hardest hike I've ever been on, but I've not been on many hikes, so that doesn't really say much.
Damn. Okay. Um. Okay. Was it enjoyable for you guys?
I really wish I could say yes, but I don't think it was, man, because
Mm,
it was just so inclined that like you just run out of breath so quickly. Um, but I wish I could say like, oh my god, the scenery when you got to the top was worth all the trouble. But it was really beautiful, and I have some like really nice pictures that I can maybe send. But it was just it felt a little dangerous, and like I've just been more conscious about injuries these days. Um, just between the fact that like we work out and then we like play some sports every week. Like I think injury is such a big hurdle and like stoppage, especially like considering we're not like teens anymore and you don't recover from injury like right away, and like stuff tends to just nag for a while. So I was really just like, man, if I like twist an ankle or like something, fall, like that would just suck ass. So I was just being super careful all the way up and all the way down. But we went, I'd say halfway up the mountain, and we talked to a guy who was coming down. And he was like, "Yeah, you have like another 40 minutes." And at that point, um, Andrew and Randy were like, "Guys, I think we're gonna head down now because our dog, who they brought up, was starting to get tuckered out, and so they had a very valid reason to go down, but it seemed like Jimmy and Talia really wanted to get to the end of the hike, and I think the end of the hike was like another lake, like a smaller lake or something, and Sherry and I were kind of like, yeah, we're pretty tired, man,
yeah.
and
I got you.
like it would be nice to just kind of take the easy way out and just head back down and just wait in the car for them. But we were like, no, let's not be cowards, right? So we just follow along with Jimmy and Talia. But it's funny because like literally like not 5 minutes in, we run out of breath again, and they start getting ahead of us, and we're like, hey guys, you guys can go ahead first. We'll catch up. And they're like, all right, sure. So they disappear off in the horizon, and we take this really long break, and Sherry's like, dude, I don't feel too good. I'm like, oh really? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, damn, should we just head down then? He's like, yeah, I think we should. So then we decided to just head down, but going down actually took a really long time too. Because people kept saying like, oh yeah, it's really hard to go up, but when we go down, it's gonna be pretty fast, right? 'Cause it's just all downhill. But what you don't realize is how like slippery things were, and so like you almost had to be like slower on your way down. It was easier on the respiratory system because you didn't have to like climb up these steep steps and stuff, but um, it was a lot more taxing on like your, I don't know, nervous system, I guess, because you're just constantly like watching out for slippery um like ledges and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. um Remind me though, did you guys end up going on any hikes in Hawaii?
We went on a couple. Yeah, and there was like, I mean, hikes. They're either like paved and like not even paved. There's like a dirt road and just like it's like a super chill hike, or they're like kind of sketchy where you're like sort of on a ledge and there's like a lot of rocks and you got to take a step like half a foot at a time or else you just fucking slip and die. I'm assuming like your hike just now was like kind of close to the ladder.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a trail versus like, yeah, some,
So
yeah,
there's like a path. Yeah.
right. um and funnily enough, we actually saw mountain climbers. Like, I don't know what you would call them, mountain climbers, rock climbers. Not definitely not rock climbers, but boulders. I guess the term is mountain climbers, but we saw them. It was pretty cool to see them. Like they were literally scaling the side of a big ass like mountain
Mhm.
with
Okay.
all the equipment.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we saw some guys at the top of the mountain, just like looking down. So that kind of goes to show like kind of the area you're in.
Right, right.
Yeah. So we eventually all get down, and then we head towards the lake again. Now, earlier I said that the lake doesn't really have any beach fronts. And that was kind of a lie because in the western part of the lake, there actually is a beachfront called Boulder Bay Park. And it was like this really nice um, area that has like a grassy park that leads into a beachy area. So that's kind of what we were looking for the first day. And somebody found it when we were on the way to the hike and we circled back to it. So finding that was definitely like really great. And I would definitely put that on like a recommended list if you were to go to Big Bear again. It's probably the closest thing to like the imagination I had, where like people were just chilling by like the beachfront, and then others were in the water. And there were rentals there too, which we weren't sure if there were gonna be, but there was kayaking and there was paddleboarding. So what we ended up doing was meeting up at this area, and there were a bunch of people there already. And we rented one paddleboard and one kayak, and we brought it over to the beach. And then this is like another part of the lake. So the lake is like really big. Like I don't know if you can see the whole lake at once unless you were like all the way up the mountain. But definitely from like ground level, you cannot see the whole lake. It's like kind of like segmented. And so this is a part of the lake that we hadn't like seen yet, because this is the western side and our Airbnb was on the eastern side. And then we did a little bit of exploration of the northern side and the southern side, but not the western side. So what we did was we had Talia and Jimmy go on a kayak together because they heard that there was an area out in the lake where you can dock your kayak or paddleboard and then climb up these like rocks and do some uh like cliff jumping into water. So they were excited to do that, and so they got into a kayak and went there by themselves. And then Andrew and Serenity were kind of take turns on the paddleboard because Serenity didn't want to get on the paddleboard with Andrew because, like I said, he's like this big goofball, and you can see it when he got on the paddleboard and immediately fell out into the water.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So now that I think about it, I actually have some group pictures that I can send to you
Okay. Yeah.
that where you can actually put some faces to these names, right? So let's see. Okay. All albums. Okay. So here's a group photo we have. Um, so in this picture, this is during the hike. On the left is Jimmy, and then followed by Serenity, Talia, and then all the way on the right is Andrew.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, oh, and there's the dog too in the bottom right corner. And then I wanted to send you a picture of the scenery because I think it would be very different from what you remember because you went during the snow, right?
That first picture was from the hike.
Yeah, it's from the hike. Yeah, so here's a couple of pictures. Hopefully I can maybe like do something where I can add these pictures in post or something. But here's some pictures of the scenery. This is kind of like halfway up the hike.
Mhm.
These pictures aren't actually that great, but you can see like the lake in the background and then the trees and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we like eventually get to like this like Boulder Bay Park area, and then Serenity and Andrew are just taking turns on the paddleboard, and then Sharon and I are just kind of watching the dog, right? And then They eventually get tired, and then we switch out with them, and then we like double team the paddleboard, and we go out into the open lake again, and um, again it was like just really nice, but this time there's a little bit of fear because we were on like a beachfront area. I was more encouraged to like and run into the water and jump in. So I like took off my clothes and like walked in, and like I already mentioned this, but the water is just really cold, right? And that's like such a big bummer. Like anytime you go to like any water area, like the ocean or whatever. But I thought I was just being like a little wimp, so I just kind of like went in, like just like ducked down and just put my whole body in. But for some reason, I had such a bad reaction to the cold water. Like I got out, and then like the wind blew against me, and immediately my body started shivering, and then my hands started getting numb. So I got out of the water and like walked towards our stuff and grabbed my towel, and like it was so bad. Like I had to like put my clothes back on and like wrap myself in the towel. I don't know why, but um, it's significant because when we eventually went on the paddleboard again later, this time I was much more afraid of tipping over. Not only because this part of the lake you can go out much further with the paddleboard, so you're like really stranded if you fall in. Because it's actually pretty difficult to get back on the paddleboard. Now you you are required to wear life vest if you're gonna paddleboard out. Like they make it a point to tell you that if you get caught with it off, you're gonna be fined $1,000.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so you definitely need to have a life vest, and I wouldn't dare go out there without a life vest. But initially, when we first paddleboarded, I almost thought you can get away with like paddleboarding out and then jumping into the ocean, or sorry, the lake, and like kind of like frolicking in the middle of the lake. But that's definitely not plausible because, um, like, first, you have to be a pretty strong swimmer because the currents, although not as strong as the ocean, definitely still exist. And so it'd be really difficult to get back on the paddleboard. So you'd have to like swim back to shore yourself. Now you do have the life vest, so it can kind of help you stay afloat. But secondly, the water's just really cold, right? And if you expend all your energy, then you have no more energy to like kind of help you stay warm, right? So this time around we went, I was just like really keen on like not tipping over in the middle of the lake. Now, here's where the story gets kind of interesting because we couldn't spend much time out there because we rented it for 2 hours, but figured that Serenity and Andrew would want to go again because we did promise that we'd watch Luna for the majority of the day. So we went out, kind of like had a nice view of the area, and then we came back in. Now, on the way back in, I'll kind of paint you a picture of what the beach kind of looked like. So there's like a shore with like some sand, right? And then in the in like very close to you are these big rocks. And I almost thought that these were the rocks you would jump off of into the water. But it turns out these weren't the same rocks. So there's like these big rocks, and there's like three of them, right? And like from left to right, there's three of them. But there's openings in between each rock. So it's like rock, opening, rock, opening, rock. And you can paddleboard between these openings into the actual bigger lake. So they're kind of like it's kind of like a gate to the bigger lake, right? So I'm hoping I'm painting a good picture. So it seemed to me like it was pretty common for people to try to swim to these rocks because I'd say it's probably like I don't know, like 50, 60 feet away from the shore. So it's not that far. Like you can definitely swim out there. Um, so we're on the way back. We passed the rocks, past the openings, and we're on the way back, right? And I see a couple guys in the water who were attempting to swim to the rocks, and they were kind of like, I don't know, their hands were kind of like flailing a little bit, but I didn't think much of it. I thought they were just like messing around.
Oh boy.
Now they'd gone to a point of the water where definitely your legs cannot touch the bottom anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we're on the way back, like we're like nearing the shore, and then Cher's like, Nick, what's up with those guys? I'm like, don't worry about them. They're probably just like messing around. But then I turn around to look anyways, and it's like these two dudes, and one of the dudes looks at me. He says, "Yo, help!"
Oh
And
my god.
I didn't understand what's happening because although I know that the majority of drowning is silent and it's not the way you see it in media where they're like flapping about and like right. Although I knew that, it was just so calm that it just didn't register to me what was going on. So this guy's like, "Yo, help!" And
Okay, wait. So at this point, the guy who says "Yo, help" is he the guy that you think is drowning at this point? Like, you don't have to like spoil it, but like, what's the picture here? Like,
right,
who's saying "Yo, help"? And then like, because there's some other guys, are they coming to save them? Is everyone drowning? What's up?
so in their area, there's only two guys,
Okay,
and they're both friends. Now, I know there's two guys, but the guy who says, "Yo, help," I'm fixated on him. So I don't even notice his friend in the back. But they're both afloat, like both heads are above water. So
okay.
I just
Are they wearing life
assumed
vests or?
they're not wearing life vests because they're not paddleboarding or kayaking. They're just swimming. Now, the guy who said, "Yo, help," I already saw that he was holding something in his hand from way back. Like I could tell he was swimming with something in his hand. So I assumed that because he was holding something in his hand, that it was making it harder for him to swim. So he was the one that needed help. Um, I'll come to find that it was actually his friend that needed help. And when he said, "Yo, help," he meant like, "Yo, come help my friend." But because he was expending so much energy to kind of like get help, he ended up needing help too. So to get back to the story, our paddleboard was facing the shore, but then these guys asked for help, and somebody on shore, some woman was like, "Yo, go fast, help!" And that kicked my brain into high gear and into alert mode, and that's when I finally realized what the heck was happening. Like these guys were about to drown. So then we had to like hurriedly turn the paddleboard 180 and started paddling towards them, right? And I'm like, I think I'm one of my traits is that I feel like I can stay kind of calm during emergency situations. But despite being calm, like a million things were going through my head. Like what's the best course of action, right? Like you never really, I don't know. I've never really thought about like what would I do if something like this would happen because I've never been to a lake. Like if it was the ocean, it'd be a little bit different too. Um, so I'm like, okay, should I like throw the oar to him so he can kind of like hold it or something? And I'm like, no, that wouldn't work because the oar's not that buoyant. And I'm like, should I jump off the paddleboard and swim to him? And I'm so glad I didn't do that because I think that would have been probably the worst mistake because although I have a life vest on, this guy was definitely bigger than me and I I can swim, but there's no way I would have been able to like drag him in.
Yeah, like float both of you guys.
Yeah, there's no way. Um, and I was also thinking, Sherry was also thinking about taking off her life vest and throwing it at him, which I think would have been a bad play because, for one, she can't swim. So we would still need to get to them to kind of like help them. Now, like if the paddleboard top was over, now she's screwed, right? And then the other thing is, I think getting the life vest on while you're underwater would have been really difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Like the only thing he could probably have done if that was the case, was probably just hold on to it and like help with the points a little bit. But I don't even think that's a good idea because then your hands can't help you float at that point anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Like it's
okay.
definitely not like a tube or anything, right? Because when you look at lifeguards saving people, they throw like that fat, buoyant tube, and people can like kind of get in it, and then they're good. But a life vest, it's the it doesn't really act that way, right? So
Yeah.
I'm so glad we didn't do any of that, and instead, me and Sherry just hella paddle towards them, and then we only have one oar, so like I'm like rowing, and Sherry's like paddling with her hands, right? So we get to the one dude, and he just like holds on to the paddleboard with a vice grip. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. And I'm like trying to comfort him, like, yo, dude, you're good. Like, we're here. Like, you're okay. And Sherry's like, babe, we got to go for his friend too. And I'm like, oh my God, his friend is also drowning, dude. And I didn't realize, like, we literally took like 5 seconds to I'm just like standing there with him. And his friend is just over there, like maybe 12 feet away, just also like drowning. And
Like
like,
when we say he's drowning, he's like sort of bobbing up and down, like sort of barely getting air type of shit, or what's
yes,
going on?
yes, yeah. Like he's like kind of like his head is coming in and out of the water. Like,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah. Like he's not staying afloat. Like he's not. treading water.
Okay,
And,
okay.
and I told you initially he was the one that needed help, right? And so like
Right.
we really need to get to him.
Uh-huh.
And it was just so scary because it's just so different from what you would imagine drowning is like, where they're like flapping and making a lot of noise. Like it's just so hard to tell from the untrained eye what the hell is happening. Like this guy's literally, it might look like he's just like messing around in the water, right? That's kind
Right.
of what it looked like.
It's
Now,
like I don't know what the word is, but it's like disconcerting or like almost like I don't know. There's like a term for this where it's like it's it's almost uncomfortable how like
subtle it is.
subtle, yeah, subtle it is. Like this guy is fucking dying internally, but then he just looks like, it's like totally quiet.
I know.
He's just like
Yeah.
chilling there, like from the
I
outside.
yeah,
And this
that's
guy is
exactly
like
it.
probably thinking like, wow, I'm about to die. Like
Yeah,
I'm literally about to
exactly,
die.
dude. Exactly. Like
Um,
so
yeah.
so what happens is I'm like paddling, but now we have three people. So it's like
So you're
really difficult.
paddling, and then this guy's like still holding on.
Yes, he's still holding on because he's definitely not going to let go because he's still in the middle of the lake. Not only that, but we're heading deeper into the lake to pick up his friend. So
Uh-huh.
then from nowhere, this like older gentleman runs into the lake and just starts swimming like a freaking madman. And he ends up making it to the other guy at the same time we did. So he's like swimming like a freaking tank, just getting there. And now
Oh
we
my
have
God,
five
what a beast.
people. So it's me, Sherry, this guy holding on, and then like his friend who's also holding on to the paddleboard, and then this other random dude who's like there, and he's like propping up the other guy. So we have five people, and now we're just like swimming back to shore, and like we eventually get back to the point where they can put their feet down, and they just kind of crawl back onto sand, and they just like collapse onto the sand. Not collapse as in faint, but just out of exhaustion. And they're just so grateful, man. They're like it just full of sincerity, like, dude, you just saved my life. Like, oh my god, I was like this close to just going under, and I was like, that's when it really hit me, like the sincerity of their voice, because like, um, I guess to give a description of who these guys were, they definitely weren't kids, like they definitely weren't like in high school or anything, and they definitely weren't like old dudes. They were like prime of their lives, like 24 to 30, fit dudes, and I guess they just weren't strong enough swimmers to deal with it. And I would find out later that they had a third friend who is very familiar with the lake, and he was just being a little bit too hyperbolic, where he was like, "Yeah, guys, like to get out to the rock, like it's easy. It's like you can practically walk there," and they just didn't realize that actually no, you can't walk out there. You have to actually be a decently strong swimmer to like get out there. And
Oh, and was this third friend with them, or he just told like direct them like, oh yeah, you guys should go over there.
so that's what I was confused about too, because I would see him later. At least I think that's him, but I wasn't sure where he was in this whole like situation, because either he was already on the rocks, or he was like arriving to the park or something. Because I he was nowhere to be found until later, like way later. So by this point, everything's setting in for me, and these guys are just like hyperventilating, and I'm just like, yo, man, relax, like you're good. Take your time to like get settled. But I wasn't gonna stick around the whole time. Like, I'm not a paramedic or anything, so um, we just, you know, pick up our things and head back up the beach. And we met up with the rest of our friends, and we kind of told our story. So I would definitely say like that's the most, you know, eventful thing that's happened um, on the trip.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
it's yeah, it's crazy. It's definitely um, like story worthy.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, wait, like, so
yeah.
like, talk about it a bit more. So like, they knew how to swim, but they just were so exhausted that they didn't have the energy to swim back, right? So they were trying to just like tread water over there by the rocks. Like, how strong was the current there? Could they not have just like floated on their back at that point?
Yeah, so they hadn't actually reached the rocks yet. They were like halfway to the rocks, and then I asked them. I was like, "What happened? Like, did you guys get a cramp halfway, or like was the water too cold? Like, what happened?" And I didn't really get a great this like response. The
Uh-huh.
guy the guy was just like, I just wasn't ready for Big Bear, man. I don't know. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like they hadn't even gone to the rocks yet. It wasn't that they got to the rocks and they were tired and they didn't have the energy to swim back. Literally, they just got halfway and something happened and then they just couldn't make it. Like I think it was like one of those spirals where like you lose confidence and you're like, oh shit, can I make it? Can I make it? Wait, yo, I can't make it. I can't make it. I think it's
Dang,
something like that.
at this point, like they're like 20, 30 like feet off of shore, or like pretty
Yeah, yeah.
pretty deep in, or
Well,
like
okay,
not too deep.
20, 30 feet is
I mean,
about
that doesn't sound,
halfway.
yeah, that doesn't sound like that much, but like, I
But
mean,
but surprisingly, they just didn't have the energy to come back.
oh man, that's crazy.
I know, yeah, it's really scary, to think that like the whole beach was just staring at them. Like,
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing. So how did the lady know to be like, oh wait, those guys need help?
I don't know. I guess she's just seen it, before or something, or she's had some experience in it. Maybe
Because
from her point of view, it was a little bit clearer what the situation was.
uh-huh. Because besides like a yo help, if you had looked at it, you wouldn't have known, right? Because you literally just about to pass them.
Yeah, I guess not. Because they were only 20 or 30 feet, I'm pretty sure their yo help was audible to the shore
Oh.
if you were sitting really close to the water. And the shore is not that big either, so yeah.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
and the shore is
Dang.
also really small. So I think that's like the more harrowing thing is that when you're at the beach, right? If you were to drown at the beach, it's so big and the ocean's so vast that you might just go without anyone knowing. Whether you get dragged out or dragged down or something, right? But this lake, it's kind of like secluded. You have to get past these rocks to get to the big open lake. So it's like a nice area for families and children to congregate and like kind of frolic in like the shallower side. And the beachfront is pretty small too. So like it's crazy because literally everyone has an angle on what's happening right here. Um, and like to think that like these guys literally could have just like died in front of all these like children and like families and stuff. It's kind of
Yeah. Was
so
there no
weird.
lifeguard on the scene?
Yeah, there wasn't. That's the thing too. There wasn't a lifeguard. They say that there's lake patrol, but they don't come in to here. They just patrol the open lake, and I'm assuming it's to like help stranded people, but also like give out fines or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Dang,
but
that's crazy, man. I mean, like
yeah,
when I was in Hawaii and I was snorkeling with Tina, like
uh,
we had met this like father-son duo that was just like snorkeling. Like we didn't go very far, right? So we were just like sort of within standing range, but like sort of barely, right?
yeah,
But they we had to pass by them. They were like, oh, because they were out far, and then they came back to sort of where we were at within speaking range. So I'm like, oh, you see any turtles, blah blah, blah, right? Just like making conversation.
yeah.
And eventually they told us that they had watched a scuba diver drown and die the day previous.
Oh my god.
I'm like, holy shit! Like this shit is like serious, man. Like, I don't know. It's scary, bro.
I know. I think like growing up, I just had this like naive,
The
um,
confidence, right? Like
yeah,
that, like you're
confidence.
invincible type of thing.
Yeah, against water specifically, and I think like you really have to grow up to realize how powerful it is. Like with, um, like watching footage of like the tsunamis recently, and then going to Huntington and like facing bigger waves than I'm used to. Like I'm really starting to realize like just how dangerous it is and how small you are when it comes to like these bodies of water.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah. So that all happened, and then
Right.
we went back up. Now we didn't stay on the shore. We actually went back up to the grassy park, and then eventually everybody met back up, and then we played spike ball. Um, I'll talk a little bit about spike ball. We played it with our friends when we went to the beach once, but I don't think we played it very sincerely. But
Yeah.
I had a chance to kind of learn the rules and like how to play it and stuff. Um, and I think it's a fun game. I definitely would say that it's a good activity to have because I think getting into it is pretty simple. It's definitely not something like volleyball where it's like it's I mean, it's a smaller form of volleyball, but it's pretty easy to get into. Um, but that was pretty fun. And then that was basically the end of the trip because we had already checked out of our Airbnb that morning because this is Sunday. Um,
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah, so I probably should have mentioned that earlier for the sake of the timeline, but we had already checked out the Airbnb that morning at 10 a.m. So at this point, we had all our stuff in our cars, and we just like kind of drove around. We drove to the hike, and then we drove to this park, and then by the end of it, the sun was starting to set, and so we just headed back to our cars, packed up our things, and then said our goodbyes and went our separate ways
Yeah, you definitely want to drive down that windy road
at night. Yeah,
before the sun sets in.
yeah. So yeah, so we also at this point, like it was probably like 6 or 7 p.m. and all we had was breakfast at like 10 a.m. So I wasn't that hungry surprisingly, and for some reason nobody else in the group was also hungry. But I knew deep down that, um, like for the sake of my health, that we should eat something before we leave. So I was kind of throwing out there like, hey, do you guys want to get food before we leave? But then Andrew and Serenity really want to get back to their apartment soon because they had some things to take care of. Um, and so I was like, man, do I really want to like hold up both Sherry and Talia by like dragging them to get food here in Big Bear? So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna suck it up. And I was like, okay, how about we just don't eat here and then we just like, kind of save up for a bigger meal once we get back, like something all you can eat. And then I threw out a hot pot. I was really in the mood for a hot pot. I know it's really hot here now in LA while we're filming this. Like I got up to 90, 91 yesterday and 89 today. But in Big Bear, it's actually really cool. Like the nights were like 50 and the days were like maybe like 80 or something. So I think hot pot was like a reasonable suggestion and people seem to be down. But between having to drive so far back, and then also the fact that Jimmy, Serenity, and Andrew, that party all lived in Irvine, and the rest of us kind of lived like west of Irvine. I think things kind of fell through because like I definitely didn't want to drive to Irvine, eat, and then have to drive back home, and then those guys didn't want to drive any further than Irvine. So we were like, all right, it's fine. We had this like this weekend together already. Let's just like put a rain check on like the dinner plan. And so we just went our separate ways, and I drove down, and we dropped off Talia, and then Sherry and I actually went to get broth after, which was really good. But we came in kind of last minute, so within like 20 minutes, the kitchen was already going to close. So we felt a little rushed, but I think broth. We've talked about this, but it's just one of the most solid all you can eats, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, I mean overall, like that's like the play by play of what happened this trip. Uh, like when it comes to like my overall feelings towards it, I would definitely say like it was a good time. I think like it was one of my first trips with like where everybody is like just like kind of adults and like super mature. So that was kind of cool. Um, because before, we went on like Arrowhead and we were kind of still like a little bit younger then, and so like it felt like I don't know, things were a little bit weirder back then. And then even before that, we went to like Pismo and I don't know, there's just like a lot of like drama or whatever. This felt like just like a bunch of like adults getting together, and it's kind of weird to think that like we're like adults now, we can just like book a vacation and we all just like plan out these activities and we just do them, no
Right.
fuss. Yeah, but I would definitely want to go to Big Bear again, and I really want to go during the winter because I think it would look really awesome, like really pretty. And I really want to like go skiing or snowboarding, but I just feel like, man, it's such a big commitment to go to Big Bear during the winter, right? Like logistically, like getting up there and back down is just a hassle, and I don't know too much, but like, did you guys have to get like snow tires or something?
Yeah, it's that's a whole like another can of worms. I think I have a feeling in our heads we're making it out to be like scarier than it actually is. But no, that is definitely like a sort of a really big hurdle in my mind when it comes to Big Bear, especially in the wintertime when there's snow. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like between like having to equip your car and then actually having to get snow equipment like clothes, like winter clothes, which
Oh yeah, that's a big
we're,
thing too.
we're not used to here in LA, right? Like nobody has super winter clothes, and then having to get the actual um like activity gear and then like the pass, like it just feels like there's a lot of hurdles.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I really want to go. I think obviously not obviously, but definitely one day I will want to go. We'll go during the winter, but I also think Big Bear during the summer is really nice too. Um, and I think all of Sherry's coworkers are just really sensible people. Like there's no like weirdo or anything. Um, I guess the last thing I want to touch on that maybe is more of a dialogue where we can have a dialogue on is like arguments during vacations.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know that you and Tina, if I recall, like one of the only like arguments you guys had was during the beginning when Tina forgot her retainers.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, I kept that wisdom in mind um, this time around for our vacation because it's really a mentality thing, right? Like I as I get older and as I go through my relationship with Sherry, I come to realize more and more that like patience is like the biggest virtue to have, like the biggest virtue in determining if a relationship will work out or not. Because you have stuff like forgiveness and being caring and stuff like that, but like I feel like on a day-to-day scale, like being patient is just so important. And I'm really grateful in how patient Sherry is because I'll just have my days or my moments where I'm just like hot-headed or I'll say something that I really shouldn't have said, and like 8 times out of 10 Sherry is just like kind of lets it slide, right? And I was trying to like embody that. So before we left for the trip, I like kind of set some ground rules for myself. Like one, like just be super chill, don't say anything aggressive. That way, like between the two of us, we'll have like a good relationship. And two, just like try your best to get along with her coworkers. Not that I had any like pre-existing like bad blood with them, but just like try to be like, you know, normal. And then third, like try not to die, right? Like whether it be like drowning or slipping and hitting my head on the hike or like driving off the cliff or something, right? Just like I don't want to end up on the news, you know what I mean? Or like something like that.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. That's strange.
I think like that's a different conversation to have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But like the whole argument thing, like we had a couple of like micro arguments during the trip. There were moments where like there's a moment where I think I said something and I kind of I leaned too hard into it, and then Sherry started to get quiet, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "Nothing's wrong," and like I think like that's so difficult to deal with, and we can
Yeah.
deep dive into it more when we have our episode about relationships.
Right.
But
right.
like I was just thinking like what's the correct play here, because all the instinct in my body wants to be petty so bad and like and also be pouty and like give her the cold shoulder, but I know that the correct move is to just continue to be accommodating and like just sweet, and it'll win them over, because like pettiness will not win them over. Nobody's gonna be petty and then receive pettiness back and be like, oh my God, you know what? Turns out I was being the asshole. Never
Right,
mind.
right. That's like winning the argument, you know? You never really win the argument because
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, they feel bad about it after. So,
Right. So
uh, yeah,
I, I would like to say that maybe, well, okay, definitely early on in a relationship, I was more level-headed with it. So whenever she would feel that way, where she would feel like maybe I wronged her, and then but then not want to talk about it and stay quiet, I would always be like, oh shit, I fucked up. Like I should just try to like win her over 200%, you know? And I think at some point I started to get kind of annoyed that I had to behave this way. Um, so then like at some point it started becoming 50-50 on whether or not I would be sweet and when I would be petty. And on this particular day, I decided to be petty back. And
yeah. I think being petty is that the right word though? It's almost like just not like because like you said, you could try to like win them back by being sweet, but it's like a tough thing to do when someone's acting that way. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of tough to sort of be nice and patient and stuff when your girlfriend is
being
sort of
difficult.
giving you the cold shoulder. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
and
that's sorry.
yeah,
Okay, finish.
yeah. I mean, and it's you get annoyed about it, right? You get annoyed that she's acting that way because a lot of times, you know, obviously in an argument you think you're right, so then you feel they're unjustified. But it is sort of like a virtue to be like, all right, let's not let's not get upset about it, right? And that's basically what you're saying, right? You can choose to be upset over her being upset, or you can try to like be the good guy, the good boyfriend, right?
Yes, precisely. Like everything you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
said is exactly what I was trying to get at.
Right. So yeah, that's I don't think it's about being petty though. It's like yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
Maybe that's just me rationalizing stuff.
yeah. And I think it's good that you brought that up because, if I might have chosen my words wrong because it's not even necessarily the case that I'm like, like it's not a facade. Like when she's feeling this way, it's not like, oh, now I have to like produce these feelings of anger and annoyance out of nowhere and then make it difficult for her too. It's like, no,
Right, yeah.
genuinely,
Yeah.
I'm also starting to get annoyed that she's annoyed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
not like, yeah, I really want to stress, like, I think pettiness implies that like I'm like purposefully
Deliberately trying to. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But it's like, no, like truthfully, like, yeah,
You're annoyed.
any
You're
normal
upset.
person would also get annoyed, right? And
Right.
I think like you said, the difference really lies in how you deal with that. Like, okay, are you gonna suppress those feelings and realize that you should be the big person, or
Right.
should you like kind of succumb to your instincts and be like, you know what, man, screw you too. And unfortunately, on that day, I also decided to be difficult back. And I quickly realized, like, damn, this is gonna get nowhere, and this is gonna be a blemish on our trip. And the trip is not even that long, so like this blemish is gonna be, it could kind of balloon to be kind of bad. Luckily, some things happened, and then we kind of like quickly made up. But then on the last day when we went to Broth, I think we were both just exhausted from the drive and from not eating. And Sherry likes to think that hunger doesn't affect her emotional state, but I 100% beg to differ. And I know for a fact that I'm not me when I'm hungry. But I try to like keep emotions high. Like I didn't want us to both be like, I'm so tired. So I try to like, even though we had to wait still when we got there for broth, I try to like, still crack jokes and like, be fun and stuff like that. But I could tell that Sherry was just like way over it. When we eventually got in, I could tell that any wrong move would kind of set things off, right? And lo and behold, something happened and she got really upset at me. And again,
Okay.
I decided to be difficult. Because Because I mean, like, dude, I'm also so exhausted, right? Like,
Right,
I
right.
had to drive for goodness sake, you know what I mean? And I'm so hungry, and this is my second meal. This is both our second meals of the day, and I'm just like, man, why can't we just be cool? That's what I was thinking. Obviously, in both instances, when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I was being an asshole at some point or another. Like, she had some reason to um, be upset at me. And I think like the tricky thing for me is that I brought up earlier that I think Sherry's really patient. Like, I'm eternally grateful for how patient she is, right? And I think that can be a double-edged sword because if you like get too comfortable with her patience or with patience, then if the rug gets pulled out under you, it's kind of shocking. So like in this instance at Brought, her patience, what the bar for her patience was a lot lower because she was hungry and tired. So when I did something that ordinarily would be passable, wasn't, and then it just blew out of proportion, and we just got really upset at each other.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I just didn't know how to deal with it at the moment. Um, I think the worst thing you can do is kind of force the situation and like, like why are you mad or like what's wrong or something. To, I think I've learned that in general you should just let things kind of play out and then either like sleep it off or talk about it later. Like removed from the tension and whatever. So we just like ate, paid, left, and um, I don't know why, but I just had this inclination to hold her hand on the drive back, and it was just her and I at this point. And I think that kind of signaled to her that I was sorry, and so that ended up being the ticket. Because I think like it was like a 15-minute silent drive back, and I was just holding her hand, and I think we both were just like reflecting on this trip and like the bond, like how much closer we got from the trip, and like I think just that silence and the fact that we just came back from a trip just like helped us kind of realize like, hey, this is stupid. Like, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. Like, um, hopefully she understands that me holding her hand is me kind of saying sorry and that like, I really care for you, and like let's continue to have more trips in the future. Like let's continue to be in each other's future, right? Like I'm not saying the argument was that bad that we're gonna break up or anything. I'm just saying like I think we just kind of let it go at that point.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah, so I eventually just got back, dropped her off, and yeah, that was the end of it, man. Like yeah, so that was Sunday night, and Monday was the first day back, and I have to say, like, there were a couple of things that I felt like I'd learned from the vacation, but
Yeah. That was my final question. Like, what were the takeaways of the trip?
yeah, so I have some trivial things, and then I might have like some more like meaningful things to talk about after. But some trivial things were that the Airbnb actually had blackout curtains, and it was so nice. I didn't realize how freaking bright my room got in the mornings. Like I'm not even talking about like noon. I'm talking about like 9, 10. Like it's
Right.
so freaking bright in here, dude. And it's so good to have curtains, blackout curtains, and the room stays dark. So that's like one of the first things. And I kind of regret not getting blackout curtains the moment I moved back home, because it's kind of too late to get them now. That's one thing. The second thing is I hadn't realized just how soft my pillows and mattress was, and is relevant because I actually think that I don't know, I somehow like messed up my right collarbone, and it was like really uncomfortable for like parts of Sunday and then all of Monday, to the point where like I really didn't want to go to the gym, and we ended up not going to the gym. And then I got really sunburnt too. So overall,
Yeah.
I was just super uncomfortable. Like my nose was super dry, my lips were super dry, my body was aching and like twisted the wrong way and all that. So I just didn't expect the post-vacation um, fatigue to be so bad. I'm slowly creeping out of it, like today. Um, and then I guess some like things I learned that maybe were more meaningful are like I think having like a flexible, carefree approach to vacations when you're around like other people is like pretty important. Nobody during the trip was difficult, so that was really nice. Like everybody was like just super accommodating. If you felt like doing this or that or didn't want to do this, like there was no like nobody forced you to do anything.
Right. I think
What's up?
that reminds me of like, I don't know, when I was like still roommates with like rooming with like Kevin and Anthony and Irvine, there's like this concept of like people just have different like bars in their head of what like something as trivial as when a bag like the trash can is full enough to be like considered okay, like you got to take this out, right? And that can cause like issues for roommates because when one person thinks that like yo, this shit's full as fuck, then another person might feel that's like nah, it's got some space, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the same way, I think like someone had mentioned this when it comes to vacations. Like there's like a couple like there's two different camps, right, of people who are like, oh, we're on vacation, like this is like a chill time, just just like do whatever you want, it's like relaxing, whatever. And then another camp's like, yo, we're on vacation, we gotta like wake up early and make the most of it.
Yeah.
And it makes things difficult when those two people, like those two very extremes, go on vacation together. So I think I don't know, it's just something that came to my mind. But
yeah, I think it was Thomas or Ryan who brought that up actually, right? When they went to Hawaii.
yeah, because I think Thomas was saying that he had to wake up early because Ryan was like sort of making everyone get up early. And like, where do you think you fall in that camp when it comes to like chilling on vacation versus sort of making the most of it by trying to like extract as much time out of it as possible?
I think I'm definitely closer to Thomas.
Gotcha.
What about you?
I feel like I'm sort of more of like the regimented schedule guy. That was sort of the case with my recent Maui trip, where Tina had like done all the planning with the itinerary, but then I was sort of the one who was like trying to execute it. Like trying to get up early, like yo, we got this today, let's do it. Like we're not gonna make it if we don't, type of thing.
Yeah.
That's just like an interesting like observation though, that like there's sort of compatibility ties when it comes to vacation together. But then I think regardless of that, though, right? Like I think the overarching idea when it comes to vacation is to just be, like you mentioned, sort of more chill. Where it's like if you're on one extreme and then you're sort of dealing with others in the other extreme, maybe you should just be chill and just like go with it, right?
Yeah.
If you don't like waking up early, typically, but then that's what everyone else is doing, just suck it up. Or the other way.
Yeah. I think it's even more evident because these group of people are not my native friends.
Right, yeah, so you don't have as much of a like,
say.
it's a little bit more uncomfortable to be like be selfish in that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just alluding to that because
Right.
everybody, it didn't feel like there was somebody who was like one extreme or the other, which is really nice.
Everyone's like mostly chill. Like there was no one really had like a problem with like what the group was doing. Like had any objections, basically.
Yeah. There was no drama. There was no like conversations behind the back. Like, oh my god, why did Ken and Sherry leave us and go paddleboard? It felt like everybody was just happy to be there. So yeah, that was really nice. But yeah, I think that's everything that I really want to talk about. I think I may have droned on for a long time. I was kind of like hoping to stretch it out a little bit, but I think I stretched it out a little bit too far. So yeah, we should probably end the podcast. You have anything you want to say for the future? Or anything you want to mention from the first episode that you forgot to?
Nah. That was an interesting thing you said though. Like, anything we want to say for the future, so like documents it
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Either to yourself or um, like something you want to allude to for future episodes.
um, Nothing in particular. Do you have a? I guess the rec for this episode is Big Bear. Go to Big Bear
Uh,
and don't drown. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. The rec for Big Bear is be good at swimming if you're gonna get in the water and go paddleboarding. I do have like I don't know if we're gonna have a rec segment every week, but I I have found a new ingredient that I really like,
Okay.
and it's feta, feta
Oh,
cheese.
feta. Okay.
Yeah, I've fallen in love with feta recently. So
Was it because of the pizza the first night?
no, 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 no. I discovered it like a couple days before. Um,
Oh, okay.
I just picked it up from the store, and I really like how salty it is, and the way it like crumbles, and like you don't need to like melt it or anything, because like oftentimes you really need to melt cheese to make it like bring out its full potential, right? Like nobody's gonna put shredded cheese on like I don't know, what do you put shredded cheese on? Whatever, like a pizza. You gotta melt the cheese on the pizza. You know what I mean?
Right,
But
right.
but I really like feta because you can use it for like salads and like because like you don't put shredded cheese on a salad. You have to put stuff like feta or blue cheese or like the real mozzarella, not the pizza kind, but like the soft one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, that's that's my recommendation for this week is go out and try feta.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. See you guys in the next episode.
Bye bye.
Bye.